was the first, and I think some people in the chat might relate to this. You know, like you start your life like, oh, my first bachelor party. I've always heard about these, and then
the movies.
Yeah, and then you're the one suddenly. It's my little brother. You're suddenly the one cleaning up and being like, how could anyone ever live like this?
Oh man, looks like hey, we're live. We were just talking about this weekend coming up. Hey everyone, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. This is Brian. You didn't believe this, but we talked yesterday. This is my first time as a designer on Live Design, so I'm happy to be here. I'm usually the host.
It was about time. I mean, the host, that's the easy job. You just sit there and look pretty. So today we're going to see if Sean is just more than a pretty face. No, obviously you're just as technical as the rest of us. And if you guys haven't seen on our YouTube channel, after this show, go in there. We have all of our SOLIDWORKS live design, manufacturing live episodes. We got dozens and dozens of them. And Sean, of course, you're usually hosting on the other side of the camera, if you will. So I'm excited to host and see what kind of knowledge you're going to share with us about the API.
Yeah, well.
Oh, API? Sorry, API.
I'm second guessing your hosting competencies.
API. I don't know. I mean,
it's not. See, the host role is not as easy as it might look, right?
Oh no, can we cut that?
Right, yeah, let's start over.
My goodness. So the API, in all seriousness.
The API. Yes.
I was surprised to learn you knew about this. In fact, you've presented at World on this topic. When did you start getting into API? Like how long ago?
I would say probably about 6 years ago.
Okay.
So 6 years ago. I programmed before. I mean, for the SOLIDWORKS API, I would say 6 years ago. I did some coding in college as well. But SOLIDWORKS API about 6 years ago. It's one of those things where it's just like, you know, and we'll talk about actual like practical applications of it. But for me, it was really just a general interest, right? You love SOLIDWORKS, right? I have my CSWE shirt on here today, you know, you learn like, hey, I can automate this. There's a way to build more SOLIDWORKS onto SOLIDWORKS. We try to do that. So that was really the impetus for me. But everyone has their sort of different reasons.
I probably like a lot of folks who've dabbled in it. Like I've tried recording, you know, they used to say, oh, just record a macro and then you can play it back and do anything. But like it never works because you probably record it in a specific document or context. I don't know. But I mean, I haven't ever really dug into SOLIDWORKS API much beyond trying to record something or, you know, downloading something like from the forum, like a macro and making use of that. And then we have some macros that we use on our team to, you know, clean up data sets, remove intellectual property of our customers and that kind of stuff. But I'm excited to learn today from you. Now, you said you programmed before SOLIDWORKS API. What was your first programming language or hardware? Like how far back?
I think the first programming language I ever wrote in, I think was, and it wasn't even on Windows. Like I started out actually on a Mac using Objective-C.
Okay.
So it was in college, as part of a course. It's big textbook. Originally it was like with like a game development project. And then professionally got into it, started teaching the API course, the SOLIDWORKS API course, which those of you who don't know, we have one, we do have one. Yep. It's actually an e-learning module now that you can take, and plenty of our partners teach it as well. Doing different projects for different SOLIDWORKS customers, and it's been a joy of mine. Again, love coding, love SOLIDWORKS, so it's the best way to marry the two.
That's awesome, and now I've Objective-C. I never got into C much. I started my programming with QBasic. I know we were talking about that a little bit yesterday. Like QBasic built into DOS 6.22, and you could do fun things like write like a number guessing game and just like command line stuff where you're just like move to line 10. You know, nothing too sophisticated, but did enjoy some time with Visual Basic.
You gotta start there, right? It's like that's the hello world.
Well, speaking of hello world, thank you so much for being here on today's episode of SOLIDWORKS Live Design. We're going to be talking about the API, the Application Programming Interface, with Sean O'Neill. What is it? And is it for you? And if it is for you, maybe some tricks and how to get started with it. So it's going to be pretty encompassing. And I think more than anything, maybe it'll help you understand if this is something you want to spend even more time on. We were just talking about programming languages. And yeah, the more you want to do with API, the more you're going to want to have to invest in learning a language. And there's some other ways you can do a lot of automation in SOLIDWORKS. And heck, that's what it all comes down to, right? Is automating what we need to do that's repetitive and something that a machine could do for us. So I'm your host. My name is Brian Zias. I'm so excited to be here hosting today's live design. We have Sean O'Neill. We were just talking to Sean about he's usually hosting SOLIDWORKS Live, SOLIDWORKS Live Design. You can find all those episodes in our channel on our playlist. And this is the first time you have been the designer, the technical talent on SOLIDWORKS Live Design. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Like you said, Brian, I mentioned this yesterday during SOLIDWORKS Live, but we all wear many hats. Commonly I'm hosting SOLIDWORKS Live, you guys all know, but also work on our governance solutions, right? With Project Planner. And as some of us have learned, I think some of us knew, but really love the SOLIDWORKS API for all its capabilities. And I think it's definitely not lost on this community either. Like you mentioned, Brian, kind of heading into the episode, there are people that present on the SOLIDWORKS API at Worlds, at user group meetings. I think as of, back when we had the legacy SOLIDWORKS forums, even now on 3D Swim with the SOLIDWORKS user forums, it's one of the most popular topics, and notwithstanding parts, assemblies, and drawings. So I'm very excited to kind of bring it to this stage and sort of have this conversation, which live design is, as opposed to SOLIDWORKS Live design is very much about, picture you walked up to me at a user group meeting and I just so happen to have some stuff prepared to show you. That's kind of what it's all about.
You mentioned the online forums. We'll definitely circle back by the end and talk about some of the resources. We've already talked about your resellers actually have a course, the SOLIDWORKS API. How many days is that course?
So it could depend. I mean, it's usually either 2 or 3.
Okay, so that's your book, your spiral bound traditional training. Right. We have online e-learning, of course, the online 3D Swim. Now you mentioned World, and Sean, you were telling me you actually did a World session back in Dallas. Was that like 2018? About API. So you're not new to this, and you've actually been instructing it for a while.
Yeah, so that was a pure joy, because I think much like we'll see today. I mean, this is really a conversation about, is the API for you, and moreover, I think a conversation about automation, because I think that's really what we should be talking about when we talk about the API. But yeah, speaking to that presentation at Worlds. It was pretty encompassing. I think it was about 90 minutes. We looked. It was kind of like from start, like, okay, let's make our first macro.
Was this a hands-on session?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the courses that resellers do teach are pretty much hands-on the whole way.
This is probably something that you're gonna have to try, and maybe you can try following along today with what Sean does. But yeah, I'm sure you're not gonna sit back and then be able to go apply this. You probably gotta be getting your hands dirty and trying some simple things like,
oh, absolutely,
hello world. 100%. I was asking you yesterday, like, when you traditionally program, the first thing you do is make a message box or dialog box. Hello world. What's the hello world equivalent in SOLIDWORKS API?
I think it's still pretty much that. I mean, I guess it depends on what your starting point is, right? If you've done the actual hello world, then you're probably more well equipped to do other things. It was funny, we were saying yesterday that the SOLIDWORKS equivalent of hello world is, I said it was a cylinder. Andrew said more aptly, making like a rectangular prism with a hole in it, which box with a hole. I would agree. Probably using the macro recorder, I would say, is like step one. Just like see how SOLIDWORKS thinks, in some vein. That's what I would say.
Well, let's get into it, Sean. I know you got some content prepared for us. Let's get into the conversation. I know you did want to kind of start back at the beginning.
Yes.
Is this for you? Because automation, we all want to automate, but between Excel automation and third-party products and even just configuration tables, we saw those enhanced in 2022. Why would we use API?
Yeah, and even before I get started, you know, I was making a point of saying this during the live streams, but I'm looking at my phone now, and Brian, I know you're monitoring the chat. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. This is live. We can certainly address them here as we go.
Yeah, Casey was wondering about, can I use API in 3D Experience SolidWorks? You know, if so, what's different? I know you have that. That's what you're running now. So great, we can touch on that, and we can talk about the swim. You know, the community, the SolidWorks user community, and how to best navigate and be part of that community. So Casey asked that. And then good question, Casey, about the API certification. I'll see if I can make some texts while Sean's going and see if I can find the answer for you.
I have a funny story, actually a cool community story about that certification as well. You know, that I'll tell if you get that answer.
All right. Well, we got 52 minutes left.
All right, let's go.
Let's get into what you have prepared for us, Sean.
So this is a conversation, by the way. So I titled this session specifically with intent, I should say intentionally, you know, Designer's Guide to the API, because a lot of people are looking to get in the API for a specific reason. Usually it's because they're trying to automate something about their own processes or something within their company, you know, for their group. They have a specific idea in mind. But one thing that I always do, like whenever I'm having this conversation at user group meetings, which I've had a countless amount of times, honestly, or at 3D Experience World or on the forums, is why. Start with why. It's a well-known Simon Sinek book title, but it's also how I think about this particular topic. You know, why and what do you want to automate? And we will get into SolidWorks, and we'll show some examples in a bit. But again, I try to preamble all this with this particular type of workflow because we should start here. Like, what is SolidWorks? When, you know, we talked about the API fundamentals training course, right? Two or 3 days. There are other training courses too. One of them is Essentials. And when you take Essentials, one of the first things you look at is probably on like page 2 or page 3 is that sort of question of what is SolidWorks, right? SolidWorks is a mechanical design automation tool.
And parametric, right? And a lot of the automation comes from just varying parameters in a configuration, like that wrench on end of day one, right?
Yeah, that takes us all back, right? So we should remember that. And even within SolidWorks, right, there are a lot of, like you mentioned, configuration table. That's another one. But just to give 3 examples, there are a lot of tools that give you the ability to programmatically either create or modify SolidWorks files or documents, right? Yeah. You think about design tables, and all these. We won't cover these today because we're going to get much more into API specifically. But you think about design tables, right? Like this idea of creating or modifying configurations of SolidWorks parts or assemblies by driving their dimensions, their features, you know, the feature suppression states, the component suppression states, using mostly Excel, right? So if that's the type of automation you're looking to do, right? You have a lot of configurations, you're looking for a tabular interface, you're familiar with Excel, you're not really looking to write code necessarily or reinvent the wheel. Maybe you're looking to dabble in some Excel-based formulas, you know, to that degree of sophistication and intelligence. Maybe design tables are for you. Maybe don't even look at the API, right?
Yep.
You know, task scheduler. You know, those of you who don't know, you have a whole application that you can start that pretty much is like our way of acknowledging that there are a bundle of automation tasks, batch automation tasks that you might want to perform on your SolidWorks models. You know, common ones that you know, many of us have either explored or advised on. You know, a batch update utility, right? If you're trying to upconvert your SolidWorks files to a new version so that they can open quicker. You know, without having to wait for that first save or testing to see how they open in the first version, or batch printing, right? Or even batch update or application of custom properties in, let's say, a folder full of documents. So SolidWorks Task Scheduler is pretty much that. It's like, hey, acknowledge there are additional things you might want to do in this sort of API/macro type way, and you don't have to write any code, but we're going to let you do it. So that's a favorite of mine. And then one that I don't think it's talked about a lot, configuration publish.
I've used that in years. That's like in the task pane, right? You can set up a form
It's awesome, right? It kind of gives you almost like a toolbox style, like drill down interface for your own components where, let's say you have like a length dimension or property and a thickness property, and you can kind of pick the first one, the length is this, the thickness is this, and then it tells you, okay, these are the available configurations of this part that you published that are still viable, that meet these conditions, right? But could still viably be inserted into the document. So these are all things to start with, I would say.
Each of these could be its own live design episode. Maybe folks watching, let us know in the chat. And of course, after the fact, if you're watching this, let us know in the comments below, which of these do you think we should do a whole episode on? Actually, I love the idea of design tables and using Excel because, again, like you said, design tables can control parameters, suppression state, custom properties.
Right.
If that's the kind of items you're looking to configure and automate, yeah, that's as far as I've ever gone. But today we got to talk about API. So I guess that's the down and over, the carriage return. What's this set of tools?
Yeah. So, I mean, even before API, if you're looking to drive models, if you're doing a lot of configure to order stuff, we do have configurator tools in our partners and alliances program as well. Most common one you'll find is DriveWorks Express, mostly because most of you have it already in your seat of SolidWorks, whether you know it or not. And so this is a way of, if you're looking to drive dimensions or drive, which configuration is utilized or, which component is present. This is a great tool to do that. And it's a drag and drop form interface that connects directly with your SolidWorks models. So this is another thing to look at. There are other configurator tools as well. The reason why I reference DriveWorks Express is because it's very commonly known. And again, it's included in many of your seats of SolidWorks.
I guess if I'm remembering right, DriveWorks gets you into like a rules base. So you think about in Excel, you can do simple logic. If the length is greater than this, then put 2 holes or whatever. But DriveWorks, I'm sure you can have all sorts of branched rules that ultimately arrive at how you would design it, given all the variety of inputs you could possibly have.
Exactly. Yeah, and they just like any product suite, they have different tiers. But Express is free. You just use it. In terms of investment, right? You always think about money and time. It's easy to get started. There's lots of tutorials online. So I would recommend, if that's the type of thing you're looking to do in terms of automation, checking that out. Again, if the others don't suffice on this larger list. So now we're in the API, right? It's like if you've gone through all these, right, and you still like feel like there's something that you want to do for you or your company that you want to investigate. I would still stay, like if you're not looking to get into coding yourself, or if you're not sure if that's what you want to do, searchable API tools. We mentioned the forums already, but Googling beyond the forums, there are plenty of sites like CAD-Sharp. There's Zerial is another one, CodeStack. All of these sites have different downloadable examples, and there are plenty more, by the way. There's plenty of stuff on GitHub as well. But just searchable API tools and examples that you can leverage. That even in our API help, we have a robust amount of examples that you can possibly leverage. And hey, it might be the exact sort of thing that you're looking for, to where you can just copy and paste the code, and then you're done. So I think you explore all those options, and then right at the bottom there, custom homebrew API solutions, which is my fancy way of saying like maybe write it yourself.
Write it yourself. Yeah.
I just like the word homebrew.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, that's this is kind of the flow that I would follow.
It's great. It's just great, because I think the biggest point here is API for you. It sure could be. There's no reason to be afraid. Just know what you're getting into, and Sean, you'll show us some of what it takes, and then just know there's that whole layer beforehand, depending on what level of automation you want to get to. You could take advantage of maybe with lower overhead, like using Excel. I mean, we all know how to write functions in Excel, and hopefully we know design tables. If not, take that essentials class or the e-learning. But I'm eager to see what you're able to do with API, maybe some examples of things you couldn't do with design tables or DriveWorks Express. So like why API then? What are the main reasons people go to that as a tool?
For sure. Yeah. So just to recap, automatable tasks. Some tasks can't be automated, right? Still require complete human intervention, right? Can't be accomplished via other means, including the ones we already talked about. You've reasonably explored other options, including partners. So you mentioned the training courses, but some of our partners actually have development capabilities.
That's right.
And that can sometimes be a good route. So before we get on to like you using it, again, because this is this designer's guide to the API as a topic overall, I think this does bear mentioning, right? And this is something that I done back when I used to work with one of our partners, and plenty of our partners have tons of very talented individuals. One of the best parts about this is, we say this all the time. They know you super well, right? Perhaps the same company that you're calling for technical support and training could possibly build you a custom solution and possibly even support it for you. You can check in with them about all that, but it is an option, I would say, to definitely explore. And then once you get there, and this is where we're headed now, you either want to or need to. In my case, I wanted to. It was a personal inspiration. I wanted to get into it. Or you need to for your company or your business. You need to continue by exploring your own API solutions. So, in my own words, if you're still with us, we're great.
Well, this is good. And Mahmoud asked a good question. He's like, what fundamentals do we need? And I know you and I talked about that a lot yesterday. Great. You've decided you want to, you really want to get into it. Where do you start? Do I need to know Visual Basic? Do I need to know C? Do I need to know .NET? And I know you're going to talk a little bit about that to kind of give us a full holistic picture of what are you getting into to really be able to use this effectively.
Yeah, and this is the final workflow that we have before we get into actual code.
Okay.
And I'll just run through this quickly, but it basically answers this question. This is what I usually tend to find myself saying. By the way, in the API fundamentals course that we have, I would say it's like 9 out of the 12 or so lessons that we have focuses on VBA. There are a couple of reasons for that. So VBA, if you're unfamiliar, is Visual Basic for Applications. It's eponymously named for the development environment that is included inside of SOLIDWORKS called Visual Basic for Applications. So you may know it or not, but your seat of SOLIDWORKS has Visual Basic for Applications, which is basically an interface that you load up. And it's, again, the language is named the same thing. It's VBA for short. And you can load it up and you can write code and press play and it can run a macro for you right then and there. No additional install. It is a very human readable language. So those of you who've coded, say, in C++ know that, if you were to compare VBA to someone that has not coded much in the past to C++ in terms of its ability to be interpreted and read readily, it's night and day.
Basic, just like going back to QBasic days, it's if then else, go to, if you're going to be one of those programmers, very, very straightforward. I think I've always struggled a little bit knowing like what objects, like how do you know where to call what with SOLIDWORKS? And I think that's maybe part of the overhead is, you can go learn Visual Basic, maybe Basic. I'm interested to also know, how do you know like where to start pulling in some of the SOLIDWORKS functions and libraries? I'm not sure what you even really call them, but how do I call extrude command and pass it some variables? I don't know, but I'm sure that's all part of what's in the help and the training guide, maybe something we can show today. And you and I were talking a little bit yesterday, like you can use really you could use VB.NET, you could use C#, C++, I believe, but the majority of us being maybe new to this or not computer science majors, we're mechanical engineers, Visual Basic should be approachable. So I think everything you're going to cover today, and you recommend people start with Visual Basic, VBA, Visual Basic for Applications.
100%. Quick shout out to this channel. If you have no coding experience at all, and you're like, okay, I get it, I understand, Sean. Like I'll start with VBA. I would still recommend just trying some things in Excel. This is less than an hour of your time. Just YouTube this video. Excel macros and VBA tutorial for beginners is by Kevin Stratford. Has a lot of videos on VBA that are Excel based. It's segmented out, but even just doing simple things like mathematical operations and working with strings like groups of text, basically. This will get you in a very simple interface. It's just cells on a sheet, right? It'll give you a much cleaner way forward into working with the SOLIDWORKS API. So I would say, if you have no coding experience, start there. You talked, Brian, about how do I know which API to call? There's a variety of methods. One way you could do that, and we'll look at this in a bit today. You could use what's called the macro recorder. Now, the macro recorder is not foolproof. Right. It doesn't understand intent, but one thing that it can do is it can, in certain cases, if you record a macro, which essentially means you press record and you do something in SOLIDWORKS. Let's say you make a sketch, you select a plane, make a sketch, extrude a cylinder, you press stop, and then you review the code. A lot of times you'll see that SOLIDWORKS will show you exactly or close to exactly what you just did. So if you're unsure of the call for boss extrude, that's what we say, the call or the function or whatever for boss extrude, then that is a way to kind of see, okay, this is the API call for boss extrude. If it recorded what I just did and I just did boss extrude, it says feature extrusion. That's the name of the call. I'm on my way.
So it'll record what you do, and I think that's where I've struggled. Is it might not get your intent. Like, does the recorder capture something as nuanced as I made a new sketch on the top plane with my center point of my circle on the origin, and I sized it at an inch. Like, does it capture all those little nuances? Because I'm assuming you can define that in the API, but will the recorder kind of capture all of those relations and parameters you put in?
In that particular example, I believe that it will. I think that's actually, so there is a lesson in the API fundamentals, which is basically that. It's the same thing. It's draw circle.
So I need to take that class, and I've actually never taught that. That's the one class probably that I've never done.
Probably true. So that's the one you haven't done.
Yeah. So sorry if that. Yeah. So it's covered in there. Great.
Yeah. But it's a great question. It'll capture quite a bit of that. Now, why is that circle the size that it is? Well, it won't know that. You know what I mean? Will it give you like a specific dimension or relation? For example, that it has to say that exact size? No, it won't do that. Okay. If that's all you've done. But it will get you to at least the point that you've described. And then, what you do with that from there, you can edit that code. You can copy and paste it into your new macro. You can, like I say here, tweak the values in the code and experiment. What if I change this value here? What happens to the code? Does it break? Does it do something different? Why does it do something different? Once you find the call itself, feature extrusion, I believe it's feature extrusion 3 at this point, basically copy and paste that into Google and search that. I do this constantly, that space SOLIDWORKS API, and you'll find the help article for that, which describes, what it's for, what the parameters are that you're seeing, because you'll see like a bunch of numbers. From there, that's learning, I think, before you move forward, and we'll move forward now, one thing I want to say is, when you start doing anything, right, you're bound to make mistakes. Even developers that have been coding for 20 years, they're still debugging constantly. Things break, they don't know why, and you have to figure it out. So just understand, if something isn't running, or if it's not running the way that you think it should, it doesn't mean that you'll never learn. It just means that that's part of the process, and it's probably always going to be. Google and YouTube are your friends. You can Google a lot of things. You can, YouTube, second biggest search engine in the world. You can YouTube a lot of things on the SOLIDWORKS API, and copy and paste isn't a bad thing. Look for code snippets that are applicable in help articles, and break down your code into pseudocode, which is a way of saying pseudocode is essentially, okay, let me logically think through the steps that I need to do to get to the desired outcome. Those are some of my biggest tips as you consider getting into the API, and things to keep in mind, really.
Well, on that note, welcome everyone. Welcome AMD. Thanks for being in the chat here. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Sean O'Neill about the application programming interface we just kind of covered in the first 20 minutes here. What is it? How does it stack up against other ways to automate? And now we're kind of on the understanding that we want to use API, we want to get started with it, and we know that Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA, that's included with every install of SOLIDWORKS is available and ready to go. So, Sean, what do you think? Give some disclaimers before we jump in.
Yep, two things real quick. Don't run code you're tinkering with on production files or folders. That's one thing I would say. Yep. Always ensure you have safe backups. Cannot say that enough. Any of you who've ever done any batch operations on anything, just make sure that is the case. And I think we're good to go. You guys ready?
Right.
I think we are good. So let's take a look. So I'm going to run through a couple of examples here. And really what they're going to pertain to is couple things you mentioned earlier. One thing is, how do I start doing anything inside of the SOLIDWORKS API? How does it know, like, are there libraries? Like, how does it know how to connect to them? So that's the first thing we'll look at. We're gonna switch up some system options, which is a very convenient thing to do because, again, we have no part open, we have no assembly open. We're basically just affecting how SOLIDWORKS works as a system. Now, one practical reason why you might want to do something like this is because maybe you want to port over like your specific options to a different computer. You might say, why would I do that when I could just use copy settings wizard? Well, yeah. Maybe you don't want to keep old registry settings and keep porting them over to different PCs or across different major versions. Maybe that's the reason. But moreover, besides just the practical example, I just want to show you guys how do you connect to the interface overall. All right, so let's take a look at that here. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. Sorry to shift it out there. All right, so I will make a new macro. All right, so first thing it's going to do is going to ask me where to put it. So I've made a folder here, and you'll see the macro file extension is SWP. It's always going to be the case. SOLIDWORKS VBA macros are always going to be appended by SWP. So I'll go in here into my test folder, and I'll just name this one System Options. Okay, so that's popped up here. I'm going to drag that over to my primary so you guys can all see. So a couple things just to start. You'll see it basically gives you like this little bit of placeholder text. So say dim SWApp as object, which we'll talk about that. And then sub main, a little bit of text in here, and then end sub. So essentially, just think of sub as right now, especially if you're not looking to be a master programmer in the next half hour. It is the place where the action happens. like basically any code that's going to run is going to run within sub main and then end sub. So anything in here is what's going to run. What we have up here is dim is basically saying, okay, this is a variable. Variables can be things where we're holding something in memory. It could be a number. It could be the number 26. It could be a string or a string of text, a word, right? It could be the word SOLIDWORKS or the name Sean. So these are basically just ways of saying, okay, computer, keep this in mind. I'm going to store something in memory that is this kind of thing. In this case, it's an object, or again, in other cases, it's an integer or it's a string, right? So right off the bat, I've done nothing but press file new, and we get this string of text.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I'll usually do, and I mentioned this pretty much on the first day of class, is I will, instead of having this as just a general object, and a lot of times in Excel, for example, if you're recording a macro, you'll see that Excel will do the same thing. It'll just be a generic object. For now, just follow my lead. I'm just going to switch this over, and I'll zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. Switch this over to SLDworks.SLDworks. So your question originally, Brian, was how do you connect? How do you make sure you're connected to SOLIDWORKS?
Yep.
Well, at a text-based level, that's one of the best ways to do it early. So basically you're just saying this variable SWApp, which really doesn't matter. I can just name this anything I want. That's fine. But I usually just keep it SWApp because it's the SOLIDWORKS application, is connecting to this library on my computer that is technically named SLDworks.SLDworks. So in the course, you get a lot more into libraries and the object model and blah, 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 all this technical jargon. I don't talk like this in class, but I'll talk like this now because, again, if this is just like a task-based thing you're doing, you don't care. You just want to make sure that it's typed that way. All right, so set SWApp equal to application.solidworks. Now, another question you asked earlier, Brian, was, okay, well, how do I know what to type? So I mentioned earlier that in this sort of sample use case, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to make it so that my options were set to specific values, right? Yep. So if I think about some of these, input dimension value. Let's say that's one that's important to me,
Good
which
one.
is basically right. It's that is an important option if you're a designer. You probably want to have that set. If you go to the sketch tab, for example, a lot of these, you might have particularities or particular preferences, I should say, for.
Yeah, please turn off auto rotate view normal too. Great for new
Okay.
users, but it drives you nuts when you're in context.
What if I don't? What if I do it with the API? I'm not going to do it now.
All right. You can do whatever you want. I mean, you do you, bro. That's why it's an option. Just saying.
You do you, bro.
If we're going to start debating,
we'll never get out of here.
preferences. I know.
Yeah, but a bunch of these, right? There are preferences. Some people I even know, they like to do create sketch a new part, which makes sense. Usually you're starting a sketch.
Yeah.
Why do you have to go up to do that? So
that
makes sense. Yeah, so you can get some buy-in there. But all that to say, a bunch of these, right? As I'm cursoring over them, you might want to customize. You might want to post on a forum article and say like, hey, here are my favorite preferences. So if I take a look back at my VBA window, all right, so I'll make that full screen. And you can see this is, if I go ahead and minimize this is just a screen. So it's connected to SOLIDWORKS, but it's just another window. So I've connected it to that library. I've set it equal to my code, the application, the running instance of SOLIDWORKS. So that's what this is. And as I reference these things, usually what I'm doing is I'm just saying like, what it is. So in VBA language, if you just do a single quote, you can just say, you can put a comment. So I can say here, this just connects this code to the running instance of SOLIDWORKS. So just like commenting or naming your features.
Yeah, nice. So
right?
apostrophe remarks out the whole line. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and on 3D Swim, by the way, I'm going to post all these macros when we're all done, so you guys can edit and take a look and run them on your own. So I'm going to make sure these are all commented out for you, so when you go back, you'll understand them. But getting back to your question, Brian, how do you know what to put in? So I went into tools options. I speculated there are a few options. You speculated there are a few options you might want to turn on or off based on your preferences.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you know which calls match which options? So let's take a look at that. The best way I can answer that really is just by going into Google, and right here what I'll do is I'll say system options to take a cue from earlier. System options, SOLIDWORKS API.
Just a SOLIDWORKS API on the back of everything that you want to find. Okay.
Yeah, you just got to append it front or back, either way. It's fine. But really, what I'm doing there is I'm typically segmenting to the API help in my search results. So you can see here, even in Google, you can see help.solidworks.com English API. So I'm always looking for that API appendage, so I know it's not just system options explainers for the the average user.
Okay.
So click on that. Couple things here. We'll get into this in a second. What I'm usually doing here before I do anything, because the search results, it's Google's algorithm, right? But it's coming up with a particular year. Try to go to your particular year of SOLIDWORKS. So if you're still running 2022, or I'm sorry, if you're still running 2021, you can go to 2021. The reason why I say that is because there tend to be new API calls that can be released with new versions. Right. Not always. Oftentimes they can proliferate for 12 versions, 13 versions at a time before they're changed. The reason why they're usually changed is because of a change in the software, right? So for example, what's new? We're releasing a ton of new content for what's new 2023. If, let's say, Boss Extrude changed in some way, there was a new option added to Boss Extrude.
Sure.
Boss Extrude probably has a new API call. Now, it's not to say necessarily the old API call won't work, but what it says is it needs a new API call for feature extrusion to accommodate that new functionality.
Okay, so there are changes from year to year, might be new or renamed items. So always good. Yeah, and in the What's New PDF, I'm sure you all study each year, there's a whole section on API. I usually skip it, but now it makes sense why you want to check that out. What's new, what's changed.
It's it's a good. Sometimes it can trail a bit. For example, if something came out like a year ago or 2 years ago, API developers will say like, hey, I really want this new functionality. Like, I'm not saying this happened, but let's say something random like 3D texture that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
And let's say there wasn't an API call when it was first released, And I was like, oh, we're developing this new application for it on the side, and we really want that functionality to be able to be automated. Just like, any SOLIDWORKS enhancement requests, commonly calling a reseller or emailing API support at solidworks.com, which you can do, to make that enhancement request.
So that's a good point. I imagine like almost everything is available to call via the API, but it might not be absolutely everything. So is it like a subset, or are there things you can do in the API you can't do normally? Or is it pretty much like if you can click it in the user interface, you can program it?
I would say it goes both ways. So there's some things that you'll see in the interface that aren't yet an API call. There are other things that are in the API that you simply can't do in the user interface,
Okay.
and some things you won't want to do. So for example, like there are certain items where you can you can mark certain features for later use. It's not really something that you would do because it's looking to do that for automation purposes. At a user level, there's no kind of parallel to that. So there's some API calls that don't have a natural user parallel that you just can't click or type in or whatever.
Okay.
So looking at this list here, you'll see that it's pretty readable, right? So we have a nice table here that looks over, for where we were just now, the system options, different areas of the system options that directly mimic the tree that you see in the options. So one area that we concentrated a good bit on, right, was the sketch area. So if I click on sketch, what it does is it sends me right to this area. And you can see it's actually showing for that version in question the exact screenshot of that. So if I take a look, just kind of zoom down a little bit, what you'll see next is another table that actually goes through each setting by the setting, and it tells you the get and set methods. Now, what that means is, if I wanted to, for some reason, verify that a user has a certain option set, I could do that. Like if I wanted to do like an if-then statement and say like, okay, auto rotate view normal to sketch plane on sketch creation and sketch edit. Is that set the right way? Then you need to get it, store it in a Boolean value, which is true or false value, and then you can evaluate that. If true, then this. If false, then that. And then what it also does is you can see that each one of these has, for the checkboxes, you'll always see it's called, and I'll zoom in here just so you can see a little bit easier. You'll see it's always called get or set user preference toggle. It's a toggle, right? It's a checkbox. So for numeric values, you would expect to not see a toggle, right? So for example, like maximum number of recent documents shown, that's not going to be a toggle. Like it's going to be, I believe it's going to be an integer, right?
So you want to make sure, that type Boolean, integer, string, like you probably have to keep that correct. You can't pass a string to this toggle button.
It'll fail.
Okay.
So when you run it, nothing catastrophic is going to happen, but you should get used to the API compiler. People often say yelling at you, more so just telling you that something's gone a little bit wrong.
What is the, I guess the colon? So I can see it looks like a command. So get user preference, blah, blah, blah. Great. That's like a function you can call. The SOLIDWORKS : is that a VBA convention? What does that signify?
It's a great question because I think it brings an earlier point full circle. So if we look at our API code even through now, again, not much has happened. I've commented a couple of things and altered this here, but you'll see this matches through one letter. I doesn't show up when you type out these library and object mappings, but you'll see this says SOLIDWORKS here, where I'm cursoring, and this one just says SLDWorks, right? So SLDWorks, SLDWorks, and then SLDWorks. Essentially, that's where this command lives. So it lives at that level of what we call the object hierarchy. So essentially, what you'll find is that these do make sense if you think about it in this way. So for example, here, sorry, I keep doing a Control Tab by accident. So here, in this case, SLDWorks, right? So that's just the SOLIDWORKS application. So we're changing the system options of the SOLIDWORKS application. We aren't changing, for example, this per part or per part template or per assembly template, right? This is changing it globally in terms of how, in this case, this operation happens when you sketch. So you'll see there's a whole library for just models, like just 3D models, There's a whole library subset just for part documents, just for drawings, just for assemblies, and others as well. Sketches, for example, it goes even deeper, but it is a hierarchy in that sense. So the topmost object is SLDWorks or SolidWorks in this case.
Okay. Okay.
And then it cascades down to models, and then it can cascade even deeper to parts, assemblies, drawings, and so forth in their individual ways. You know,
you
so
probably
like,
need. I'm assuming you need to know like where that command lives, because you might need to be like SLDWorks what dot part or something to call the right function at the right library.
Yeah. So essentially, you would first establish what we had just done before, which in this case, again, is we've established that there is going to be a SLDWorks style object. You know, essentially, it's going to hold the application. Later, we're going to assign it explicitly here. But you know, oftentimes, if it's something that deals with a model or some sort of SOLIDWORks document, we will also see. And again, this name doesn't really matter. You know, if you say, you know, dim's just telling you it's a variable, you'll always say dim for anything. SW model, that's pretty common syntax. But again, I used to say in the SOLIDWORks API course, you can name this flamingos. Doesn't matter.
Flamingos.
It's just a name that you like, and it has to obey syntax rules in VBA. But you know, try to make your variable names like something that makes sense. But what you'll most commonly see in terms of declaration statements here is you'll see SLDWorks again cascading like hierarchically, like you said, and then you'll see model doc 2.
Okay, so that's how you kind of. And I'm thinking of like you're initializing your variables, so as you call them later, you know, you're understanding it's setting it to your current application, current model document that you've opened.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly true. So when you think about libraries, and you're pretty much saying, I want this sort of area of the library, I want this area of the library as well.
That makes a lot of sense. All right.
Right. I want to be able to work with SOLIDWORks, and I also want to be able to later work with a model of some kind. Now, this won't crash if I run it, but it won't necessarily do anything either. You know, even if I don't use this variable anywhere, because I haven't assigned it to any sort of model,
right.
Nothing bad's going to happen. But again, nothing tangible will happen either. So in this case, you know, let's try just getting into like actually adding a system option designation here, and let's just do one just for the sake of time, because again, a lot of these are toggles, but just to show how it works. And you can imagine if you had plenty of these, that you know this could have some pretty cool ramifications in terms of time savings. But if we look at Sketch, you know, let's say, okay, for this purpose, I have this turned off, right? So right now it is set to false. This would be called false. So I'll say, okay, just wanted to call that out so we can actually see the difference. And so I see, and this again is kind of teaching you how to fish in a way, right? I see that the set user preference toggle is the way of actually setting that option. And it says, okay, set user preference toggle, and then it says, okay, another kind of string that kind of looks like the same thing. And then it says SW autonormal to sketch mode, comma, on flag. On flag essentially meaning true or false, right? So it says return value or on flag, which in this case would be a Boolean value. So if I take a look back at my code,
fascinating.
What I'll actually do is, before I even do that, I'm just going to copy that because I don't want to type that in.
And I was thinking like this, you know, you mentioned like you want to, and I'll let you do this while I just pontificate here, but
sure.
You know, you could use this to move settings around, but also what if you were writing a macro that was creating geometry? You could go and turn off options, kind of optimizing SOLIDWORks for that macro to run. Like if you want a macro to run, you probably don't want it trying to do normal every time. So you could like get the current value, store it, set it to no, and then do your macro and then set it back to yes, or whatever the value was for the user, and kind of return you to a normal user state.
Yep, that's pretty common actually. That's one of the examples. You say you haven't taken the API course, but I'm not sure I believe you.
No, I swear I haven't.
Well,
I taught it, but I've never taken it. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, oh, that would be great.
We've never, no one has ever done that in the history of application engineering, you know, in the SOLIDWORks channel.
Yeah, it is true. Sometimes you'll do that, like auto updating sketch entities, for example. That's one thing. Because if you're adding a lot of sketch entities at once, you don't want it updating every single time you do something, because it just delays the running of the macro, and it can make the screen flicker and all sorts of weird stuff.
Right.
So here, what I'm showing is, you notice I copied, just to pause here, I copied in the string as it was in the help, which looks similar to this, but different. The part that I deleted out, if you see here, it's highlighted. ISLD works set user preference toggle. The part that I deleted out was ISLD works, because that's just referencing a library that you have to connect to.
And you've already initialized that.
Yeah, I already initialized that. I already set it equal to my running instance of SolidWorks, right?
Okay.
So I'm saying SWApp.set user preference toggle. So it's set to that, my running edition of SolidWorks, and then a space. And then I have that same snippet of text, SW user preference toggle _E, which stands for enumeration, which essentially you could think of as like a list of different values that you can connect to, numerically or by their name. So in this case, because I'm a human being and I like to see text, I'll do SW auto normal. And how did I know that? Because I looked at the help, right? SW normal.
I didn't realize so it's real time giving you kind of the next level of that function, or whatever it wants or expects next in the syntax.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
So this is called IntelliSense. So this
IntelliSense.
Yeah, so this drop down where after the period, you type the period, and then it starts basically predicting or giving you a filtering of options or possibilities. This is called IntelliSense. So with IntelliSense, I can just double click or press tab, and I don't actually even have to type the rest of the command correctly. I'm basically just typing that in, nice. SW auto normal to sketch mode.
Okay, and dumb question. I mean, that's so helpful. But I'm thinking, is this case sensitive? Like if I didn't use that, would I have to know ANTSM?
I think it would just correct it, like when you did a space.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, like it would see that the characters are the same, and then it would basically map to it. So if you do a comma, you'll see that it's expecting that second argument, which again we saw in the help, the on flag, which Boolean. Is basically true. Yeah, Boolean, true for checked, false for not. I'll say true. This is the only one I'll do now, and again, a good practice. I'll just say, auto rotate, and I'll just do an ellipses here, so we don't have to type the whole thing. But you want to do that so that people actually, and later what it is. You might want to save this, so I'll do that, save, and then what I'll do is I will run it. So you can always just go to F5, press F5 on your keyboard, or press the play button. Now, nothing happened, but
we didn't see it happen.
Yeah, we didn't see it happen, right? You can, to your point earlier, Brian, I think you mentioned this, you can, with message boxes, right? Message boxes are a very common early phase, like programming exercise. You can, if you want, give a message box to the user to tell them, that it has succeeded in doing what it has been set to do. But in this case, and in all cases where you don't do stuff like that, it's not going to tell you. The only way you can do it is in an evidence-based way, right? You go back to options. I go back to sketch, and it is checked, right? We didn't see me do that. It was unchecked, and now it's checked.
So you could build a message box in your code, just be like message box. Sure. Are you Sean or Brian? Button Sean, button Brian. If Brian set it to false, if Sean set it to true.
And so that's where you get to some really interesting stuff. So basic, this is not in the API help because it's not an API command. There are specific message boxes you could think of some. Okay. But this is just VBA. So if I just say hello, right, and then I press play, hello.
So you can call message boxes and interrogate or whatever the word is and get answers. Can you actually build? I remember when I was playing like Visual Basic 6 in middle school, you could build forms with text boxes and combo fields and drop downs. Can you do that in VBA?
Yes. Let's so I know there's so much to get into in this
I know topic. We have like 10 minutes left, man. I'm sorry I'm like sidetracking you. So.
No, it's okay. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I would talk about this for hours, and I'll share a 3D swim post if any of you guys want to talk about it more, because I love it. Let me show you an example. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So I'm going to go and open this this battery. I'll show you a bunch of stuff in this example actually that I hope you'll find helpful. So this is a very simple battery. You figure like, okay, there are going to be some holders on the top. You'll do like a battery pack assembly, right? And maybe you want to pattern that, or you want to do like a copy with mates with it, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll do, make assembly from part. Assembly template is on my other screen. Double click that. And I'll go ahead and I'll do a green check just to get it at the, origin kind of relationship. All right, so I have that. Okay, so that's there. What I'll actually do just to fast forward, because I have the assembly there, and there was no API involved with this, is the whole set. So let me just open that. All right, so let's say I'm at the phase where I actually just want to make my full battery pack. So how would I do that? Well, let's say I wanted to do it with patterning. Well, I could do that. I could do a linear component pattern, and of course that's an assembly feature, and I can go ahead and I can do my directions. So let me do that with the macro recorder. So I've turned on my macro toolbar, which you can customize. You can turn on the macro toolbar through the customize menu, and I'm going to do record. All right, so I'm recording. Again, nothing happens, right? There's no dialogue, but it is recording my steps as much as it can. So I'm going to go to linear component pattern. So look at all these options. This is not what I want to write out. If I have to specify each and every one of these, that's such a pain. So in these cases, even if I know the call for linear pattern, if I can Google it, if I know it by heart, I don't want to write it all out. So sometimes I'll even use the macro recorder just to not because I'm lazy, but I'm trying to be efficient. So direction 1, say I use this face here. So yep, haven't specified instances yet. It's just 1, so no preview. Let's say I know it is 20.2. All right, 20.2 gets it connecting directly. And again, you might want to do copy with mates in this example. But let's do it like this for now. And then direction 2, I'll use this face, right? So the arrows are pointing the correct way. And let's just punch in some arbitrary values. So here I'll say 4, and then here I will say 6. All right, no component to pattern yet, so we don't have a preview. But as soon as I go to my tree, I probably should have done this at the top level, by the way.
Okay.
All right, green check. Well, actually, let's make this into a skip the step. You're trying to go too quickly, Brian. All right, so let's put this into a higher level assembly, because the patterning doesn't work with that particular number, because it's spacing the components in a different way. All right, so do make assembly from assembly. So now we'll put the sub-assembly into a higher level assembly for the actual battery pack. So apologies for missing that step.
No, it makes sense. And when you're doing the recorder, is it only recording the parameters that you're changing? So if you didn't go in and change the number of instances or the variable length, it wouldn't record that, would it? So you have to change it to record it.
That is a great question. So in terms of changing, right? So we think about SOLIDWORKS, right? It's there's there's required inputs and there are inputs that are not required.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, I could have gone in there and just done a green check and got a successful feature creation with no direction, no.
Sure. Nothing specified. Just
exactly. But the API is similar but different. But to your question, in the way I believe you're asking it, it will record all of those. So most of the arguments are required to be answered. The reason is because you think about a function, you think about a list of different inputs, even in this case, right? So let me just record this before I forget. So I'm going to press record again, go into linear component pattern, basically do what I just did. Okay. So first I'll do this just so you guys can see a preview. I'll do direction 1, do this face. All right, so you'll see it looks much more normal now. Direction 2, get this front face here. Okay, great. Then I'll do 20.2, which I believe was my error last time actually. And then, okay, so that looks good. Green check, but you notice even before I do green check, I haven't skipped any instances, I haven't modified any instances, I haven't checked these boxes.
Yep, nothing.
But in a sense, you're still telling SOLIDWORKS what to do. You think about it that way, I'm still specifying that you're not going to skip any instances, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a null parameter.
Yeah, exactly. So even though we don't think of it that way because we don't have to, we disregard it. I think most of us anyway. We're still giving an instruction to SOLIDWORKS to not do anything. So if I say green check here, all right, so we have that. We have the battery pack. Great. I'll say stop. All right, so now it's going to ask me where to save that. I'll just say battery pack automate. All right, so basically it's very simple. Automates a pattern. So I say save. Okay, cool. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and edit that. So we went to edit. All right, so here's what we came up with that one. So I'm going to go full screen. So you're going to see how the API thinks in a way. So basically, it's recorded all of this data. So we see some similar calls, right? It's basically establishing that we have SOLIDWORKS the application, right? This is new, right? It's setting the part variable, which you'll see similar to how I did SW model. It's doing dim part, designated part, and it's saying SWApp.ActiveDoc. So that's basically the document that you have up on your screen. Now, this is a great way to just get familiar with basic stuff. Just record something and actually observe it. Observe what it does. This call is super common, right? So anytime your intent as a user or someone running a macro is just to run it on the current document, it's probably going to be using this because that's the document that's in the foreground. Understood, right? For example, when you press the boss extrude icon, like as a user, and you're in a part, it's going to start a boss extrude in that part. It's a very, very similar idea when you specify this particular line. So you're saying in the application, the active doc, I want to run this operation there. So then what it's doing is it's saying, okay, select by ID, battery holder. So it's that was the component that I selected to be patterned. So that's how I know that. And then it does this weird thing where it says select by ray. And you can see these like coordinate arguments.
Yeah.
What that is, just to spoil that, what that actually is it's specifying the faces that I selected for the pattern direction. So it's saying in the model space, basically select in this particular area where my cursor was. Select
it's
that.
Not the model face ID, it's the actual like location of your mouse.
Yes. So it doesn't understand why I did that. Like it just knows that I did it.
Right.
Which is interesting. So in cases like these, a really good piece of advice I can give you is what I would do instead is instead of doing it that way, and I'll just suppress it here, instead of doing it that way, what I would do in a case like this, if you're going to record it, is you can go record, right? Go to linear component pattern. And what's something that's a bit more standard that I can use?
Planes.
Right? Yeah, I can use planes. So planes are they're available to be used for direction. So if I say right plane, same effect, right? And then I say front plane, same effect, right? And this does make a difference in terms of portability, absolutely, right? Because yeah, each assembly has a system-defined plane. So basically, if I'm saying check here, then I stop it, and then I go here and I say, okay, I'll keep the name macro 2 just because we're running low on time, and then I go to edit, macro 2, open. You'll see it's set to much more portable in that way. The other thing you'll see is it's doing a lot down here in terms of making that feature occur. So it's capturing like a lot of zooming in and zooming out. I'm just kind of going past it. One thing you'll find is that it's very sensitive to your cursor feedback. So you'll probably want to delete some of this. What I often do if I'm not sure about deleting like recorded macro code is I just comment it out.
So it looks like it made a comment for you. I mean, this is all just, as I'm scrolling through it, just manipulating the graphics canvas.
Yeah.
Which you don't need. The API doesn't need to do that to run.
No, and it just doesn't know, right? It's like basically, so this stuff is pretty like I know enough to know like this is pretty safe to delete, but it did capture that input from a recording, but you don't need it. So I would always clean this up. Basically, if you're not sure, always comment it out, because if something breaks and you've deleted it and you don't know what it was doing, that's not good.
Yeah.
Especially for longer macros that may be downloaded from the forums and you edited to fit your needs.
So where's the actual linear pattern then?
The actual linear pattern's here. So you'll see, it's pretty readable. So create definition, SWFL, local L pattern.
And you set it as a variable there, so you don't have to keep retyping that every single time. You're just like, set my current SOLIDWORKS feature data as a variable to this command, and then I can call it like a shortcut.
Yep. And you'll see here D1 total instances. So you can see like, and we can Google all of these and find them. You can research what they actually are, but we can kind of guess, right? Like direction 1 total instances was 4. Direction 2 total instances was 6. Now we're at the top of the hour, so I'm just going to try to do something cool and very quick. Because if you've never done this is like a light bulb moment. Brian, you asked, what do you do? I can make a form, right? And I can establish
interface.
Yeah, I can make an interface for a user, for myself even. So if I do insert user form, what I will do here, let's go back to macro, user form. Okay. So let's see. So go to my tools. Let's grab that. Oh, sorry, it's on the other screen. I was like, where is my, what's called a toolbox? There you go. So the toolbox, this is a form builder. So this is actually, I hope, a lot easier than you thought. Basically, you're clicking and then you're dragging to make a command box.
It's like making a data card.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, anyone who's used TDM, you know that.
Yep.
So we can just say this is called run, or I'll just say called make pattern. So I'm really worried about it wants me to save. X out of that. Not a good practice, but I'll X out of the save notification. So that's called command button 1 in background, but the user only sees make pattern. And then what I'll do on the toolbox end is I will add what's called a text box. So text box, so I'll make one like this, click again, one like this. Okay, I'm not going to worry about like the sizing. I obviously would.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We're short on time, but yeah,
we're short on time.
Obviously get this pixel perfect.
Exactly. All right, so label 1, I will caption this. It's all I really care about for the user. Direction 1. In your code, you'll probably want to be a little bit cleaner. So you can always change the name that shows up in the code here for name, but the label or the caption is always going to be the actual label the user sees. So I should put instances here, but I won't. Basically, what this will control is the instances of these two. So, and again, you can watch this back. I know we're going a little bit quickly here. If we go to macro, all right, so I have a lot of code here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this code here. You don't have to do exactly like this, but this should work here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the form button, which takes me here, and acknowledge here that you have a tree. So you have the user form, then you have the macro code that we've been kind of living in to this point. And you can see there's a private sub, private routine. Basically, okay, this only lives here, and this is what happens when this button is clicked.
Right.
All right. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to say, okay, so this is here. So paste that code in, and then I'm going to cut this code out as well in all its messiness. I know. A lot of view manipulation there that we don't need. And then I'm going to say, okay, paste. And then in macro here, you're like, oh, there's nothing in here. So what's going to happen, right? So I'll say user form 1. All you have to do when you launch the macro, which is the main subroutine, main, all it does, that's the entry point for the code. So it's like, okay, what do I do first?
This is fascinating. Okay, just show the show the user.
Show the user, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I say save. And okay, so that's there, but you'll be thinking, okay, well, you didn't hook it to anything, right? So essentially, well, all I have to do is go into that, double click back on that button, and what I'll say, and let me just verify here. So this is called text box 1, the code lingo for it, and it's called text box 2. So seeing as I want the direction instance to be changed by these two, by text box 1 and text box 2, what I'll do is I'll double click back into that code, and I'll find the area where the instances are specified, and then I'll say for instance
text
D1,
box,
right, text
one
box
dot value.
1 dot value. You got
it. Look at that. I remember my Visual Basic 6 days.
Yep. All right, and then we'll do the same thing here. Text box 2 dot value.
Oh yeah, that's so cool. Okay, this is actually not as hard as I thought.
It's not bad, no, especially if you're looking to do stuff like this, and you're seeing like this is all very doable on day 1. So all right, so if I do that, so I haven't tested this code yet. Hope it works. I'm sure. So let me minimize this. I'm going to suppress this local pattern because I don't want to have like patterns all over the place, and you won't even know what happened.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just go to a pretty isometric view. Then I'll go back here, and then I will run my macro. Cool. User form pops up. So we'll say 5, say 6, make pattern.
No way. Nope. No way. Look at that. You didn't even test it and it worked. Okay. That is a fantastic example, Sean.
Yeah, so it switched back, and you'll see we're right back in our ugly view because we didn't delete out the remember there was all that view nonsense. So you want to clean that code up. maybe have it go back to an isometric view for the user. Zoom to fit is a common one at the end. You'll obviously zoom to fit 2 is the most up-to-date one. But yeah, this gets you there.
All right. Well, hey, we're a little bit over time. We have a few minutes left. Is there any
Yeah.
other example you really want to show today?
Yes, there's one more. It's
All right,
already pre-written.
show us one more example, and then we'll wrap up for today. And thanks everyone for sticking around and getting just your toes in a little bit onto the API. But I'm definitely feeling like I have an understanding of it, and I also am feeling like, well, I'd want to maybe learn some VBA to truly get into this. Refresh myself on just how that code works, but also it's not that complicated. It feels really, really familiar.
No, it's really not that bad. I think that's definitely my ideal starting point there. And let me just close this out. So one other example I wanted to show you guys. I should have done a close all there, save a little bit more time. But one example I wanted to show you guys as well before we depart is there was a question in the chat. You guys see, if you look in the top left corner, this is SOLIDWORKS connected. So you can see I'm running all the macros there. Same macro code pretty much between SOLIDWORKS desktop, which doesn't have PLM included, and connected, which does. If I go ahead and let's say make a sketch, let's do my version of Hello World, which is just the hockey puck, and then I do the extrude, whatever, green check, just to get some geometry in there. There probably will be a growing amount of these, but there are API calls specifically for 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS already in the SOLIDWORKS API. So if I go ahead and go to play or run macro, that's going to ask me to run a specific macro. And then if I go to my backup folder, I have one saved. This is actually just the one that you'll find in the API help. I really haven't changed it any. But just to show you an example, there you go. I didn't click anything to do that. It's just it's just saving.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you can run some of the 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS specific things like save. I'm trying to think what else there is, but save to the platform. What about
save and open? Save and open are two common ones, right? More API calls will be coming. I'm sure of it.
Okay.
But yeah, this example is directly from the help, so you guys can find that if you're using, I don't know, Maker Edition, even try that out. But this you'll see I specified my file name in here, Sean Cloud Save, and you'll see my part name here is Sean Cloud Save.
That's awesome. So 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, which is the version that we have for 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS for makers, includes API, and you can write it to your heart's content, just like you could before. So that's good to know. And there's even API calls that we'll be expanding. That's awesome. Okay, well, Sean, I hate to cut it short. I mean, I feel like we can go twice as long here.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally are seeing the top of a giant iceberg of what you can accomplish. Yes. And I know there's so many cool examples out there, but just kind of summarize what we learned. We talked about what the API is, especially relative to the other automation tools that are out there. Configurations, Excel-based design tables, even using things like DriveWorks Express, and then understanding where the API is and when you need to pull out that toolbox. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then we looked in that toolbox a little bit and saw Visual Basic for applications. It's built right in, and how to navigate that and get started using recording, as well as the help, or just using Google, SOLIDWORKS API, and your feature name or what you're getting into. The other thing I wanted to touch on before we wrapped up is like how you can actually get in and learn more. We've already talked about your local reseller. You can do the SOLIDWORKS API class. A lot of local resellers also offer services and can help you maybe program your first macro, and maybe you can look over their shoulder. I mean, our VARs are awesome for that kind of flexibility and just helping you in the way that you need. There's an e-learning, so you can go to mysolidworks.com and enroll in the API e-learning. The last thing is the forums, which we've moved over to swim communities. Like, where would I go to ask some questions of like Deepak or you or other community members, or answer them if I have some time to give back?
Sure. Let's take a look at that. So I'll pull that up here.
I think this will also help Bloody Cub, great name. Just bought 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, can't access it. Getting started for the first time can be a little bit daunting. You got to start off by hooking up to the SOLIDWORKS user forum community on our platform. And there's a 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS place you can go and get all the guidance you need to get started.
Yep. So if you just Google SOLIDWORKS forums, it's the easiest way, or forum.solidworks.com. What that will do is that'll redirect you, and you can sign in to 3D Experience with your ID that you probably already have. And I'm sure some of you have seen this, but it's the SOLIDWORKS user forum.
Yep.
So all of that content, even it's still indexed, right? So if you Google something and you see like, oh, there's an API forum article from like 10 years ago, like it's still indexed and it'll still get you to the answer. But if you have new questions, like we see here, there's a question about converting old solid models. You can ask it here, and you can answer others as well. And I also, Brian, just before we go, I will comment the link that I mentioned. I made a post, and if you guys have any follow-up questions or anything like that on this post, I will comment it on this video so that it doesn't die with the live chat.
Okay.
So you guys can go in there, watch the replay, and ask any questions. I'll also post the macros that I made today, and as well in their entirety, as well as macros that I thought about doing today, but maybe shied away from.
So this SOLIDWORKS user forum, it's one community. You can ask any number of questions, ask them. There's the search on top, makes it super helpful. So Bloody Cub, I would go here if you need some help getting started with your 3D experience SOLIDWORKS. And if you bought the makers version, you see there's a makers community. Sean's always in there in your favorites.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I'm excited, Sean. I appreciate you sharing some of this knowledge, just giving us a glimpse of
100%.
just really a big orientation. I feel like we accomplished today. That's going to be super valuable. Maybe we didn't teach Deepak anything, but that's okay. I mean, we're just figuring out if I want to get started, how to get started. But even what you showed us with recording that macro and making the form, I'm already excited. Like I could go be a programmer
ready
right now.
Open that book, Brian.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We have a couple live episodes coming up. I'm thinking about next month and about a month from now, we have a huge SOLIDWORKS Live where we're going to do what's new in 2023. That's on the 29th of September. We have Slug Me 7 coming up. What's that, the 10th of September at 9 my time, Central, 10 Eastern. I should go back to the Slug Me. That's not going to be a 24-hour one again, is it? Do I have to like get my snacks in my cot?
No,
and,
they've gone back to, if you look at the thumbnail, they've gone back to largest. So no longer saying longest.
Okay.
But yeah, looking forward to that. And like you said initially, Brian, next time many of us will be on camera. There'll be a ton of technical experts.
I'm so excited. Yeah, our whole team has been working on digging into all the new features in SOLIDWORKS 2023 and beyond for like last couple months and putting together videos and demos. We can't wait to show that to you. And of course, talk to your local reseller, find out what they're doing for their What's New events. Those usually start in October. Great chance to meet and greet everyone from your reseller. You might not know your local application engineers or sales account manager. Great chance to just maybe meet someone face to face for the first time in a few years from your reseller. Overall, though, this live design episode is just one of a dozen we've already done this year, and there's tons from last year. Actually, for over 2 years, we've been doing this live design just to get more in-depth, in the weeds with how to use SOLIDWORKS and the design capabilities, and not just design, but simulation, everything like that. So I'll just end with the call to action. Go check out the SOLIDWORKS YouTube channel. Click the SOLIDWORKS. Subscribe, of course, and you'll see notifications where you can find out about upcoming live streams. And then we have playlists for live design and manufacturing live, which we're bringing to you every single week. Sean, any last words you'd like to say?
No, that's it. I mean, it was a joy to be on with you today. First time since 3D Experience World, which we co-hosted. But
that's good.
Yeah, I'd be down to do API anytime. I hope my enthusiasm bled through, and I hope it inspires some of you. Yeah,
if you stayed to the end, then please take the chance, leave a comment below. Let us know what you learned. Let us know what topics we can cover. And if you want to do an API, advanced API, we get some community guests on here like we've been doing this year. Otherwise, thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, guys.